What? We don't normally give spoiler warnings on these videos, but this is your first and only warning. We're gonna have some spoilers, so if you don't want to see or hear anything, you might want to cut this off now. As always, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to this video and hit the notification bell so when we drop new content, you'll be the first to know about it. We're gonna run this episode review backwards. We're gonna start with the reveal and the twist at the end and work our way backwards because there was a lot of content and a lot of foreshadowing that led up to the things that happened right at the end. We need to look at those things through the lens of what happened at the end of the episode. I think it's going to make a lot more sense. So let's get into it. The first thing I thought about when all of this went down was Steve Rogers saying, "We don't trade lives." We knew from the beginning of this show that there were scenes and tension between who Cap is and living up to that legacy. John Walker felt it, Sam Wilson felt it, Bucky has always known it and felt it. But we got a moment here where, just like Erskine predicted, just like John Walker talked about, just like Zemo talked about with Red Skull, all of these things came to a head. And the shot at the end here with Walker holding Cap's shield was intense. The episode is titled "The World is Watching," and definitely at the end with all the phone cameras and everything, that was a big deal. But those conversations were had early on, and the way that people interacted with those things all the way down to the Dora Milaje were really important to this episode. So let's go back to the beginning and let's work through all these things, knowing what we know about John Walker and where he ends up. The Wakanda backstory with Bucky and getting to see him overcoming his conditioning was excellent. I love that moment when he starts crying, where his tears go from fear to what he'll become whenever she finishes those words, to understanding that those words had no power over him anymore. I literally typed out, "He's free," before Io even told him, "Bucky, you're free." And can we just stop for a moment and give Sebastian Stan some respect here? Acting was on point for both of them, but that moment was just heart-wrenching and exciting and exhilarating all at one time. This episode took the series to another level, not just with the twist at the end, but the depth of character development that they went through in 45 minutes was fantastic. And if I could give a round of applause to the directors and the writers and the actors and the whole thing, it was fantastic. The more Zemo, Sam, and Bucky are in a room together talking, the more excited I get about this show. The conversations they have about morality and what should happen and how it should happen, not only with their own lives, but with what they're doing, are very fascinating. And again, every time Bucky talks, you get backstory when he's not fighting a battle. And every time Zemo talks, because you didn't get a lot of conversation out of him in Civil War other than his motivations, you're getting backstory. And every time Zemo talks, I like him more and more. Maybe they're going to give a payoff somewhere where you have to dislike him a little bit, but he's a very likable character. And the scenes where Zemo and Walker are in the same scene together just further juxtapose these guys, where I'm pretty sure other fans, just like me, were really excited to see Zemo and really hated seeing John Walker. The moment where Bucky and Sam and Zemo are talking about, we need to talk about what happened in Madripoor, and Zemo makes the comment, well, let's not go too much in depth over what may or may not have happened to Nagel. Zemo's got information there that Sam and Bucky don't. This plays into the whole Sharon Carter might be the power broker type thing. I'm in that camp. I've made some prediction videos about it. Our latest prediction video, we got quite a few right on that, and we'll discuss that later on. But there were some more hints in this episode that Sharon Carter has more information and more insight and a little more power, quote unquote, than she let on to begin with. don't really know many art dealers that have bands of soldiers armed with guns where she can just walk freely in the low town of Madripoor, which is what she was doing in this episode. The power broker is moving in, and later on we're probably going to get some of that in episode 5 and 6. There were so many conversations early on between John Walker and Lamar, between Sam and Bucky. The conversation where Zemo asks Sam, would you have taken the serum if it was offered to you? And Sam says, of course not. I wouldn't have. Zemo actually gives Sam a lot of credit and a lot of respect in that moment. Not that Sam had to earn Zemo's respect, but you see it, that he said it so quickly, and that Zemo was surprised that he said it so quickly. You wouldn't take the serum. I was really glad that Zemo crushed all of the serum vials. I thought he might look at him and take one. Maybe he was tempted for a moment, but he crushed him. He stayed true to who he was, which is more foreshadowing when we get to John Walker, who did not stay true to who he was. These character moments that were built up in this episode to where the characters had to wrestle with their own inner morality, they were all teed up perfectly, and the payoff was fantastic. Compare that with John Walker asking Lamar, would you take the serum? And his response is vastly different.
For gosh sake, watch your language.
I mean, even his own comments should tell you that he's not Steve Rogers and he's not Captain America, and he shouldn't be. Well before he did what he did in public, on camera, in front of the entire world. I'm still in shock. And we'll just stop for a moment here and pay our respects to Lamar Hoskins. We'll Battlestar. Okay. In the midst of Zemo and Sam and Bucky's conversation early on, Zemo even has to admit, there's never been another person like Steve Rogers. Steve was not a horrible guy. He was the exception to Zemo's rule about super soldiers and where he comes down on the fact that they should not exist at all. When Sam confronts him about Bucky and saying, well, what about Bucky? He actually has to grapple with that idea. Zemo has experience with Bucky. Zemo has experience exploiting Bucky. He has experience destroying everybody else in Siberia that was like Bucky. And then to be confronted with his own struggle, his own sins, so to speak, when Sam says, well, what about Bucky? Bucky's got the super soldier serum. Does he deserve to die? Not only makes Zemo have to confront his own actions, but it's Sam again letting you know that he has a moral compass that and a way of viewing the world that other people don't. Another reason that he deserves the mantle more than anybody else in this show, and we're building up to that. It's been known from the moment that Steve gave Sam that shield at the end of Endgame, and we've known it the entire series thus far. And when that moment happens, it's going to be like Steve picking up Mjolnir at the end of Endgame. It's going to be a really great moment, and they're really building up for that, and I can't wait for it. It's going to be awesome. They try to make you feel a little sympathy for John Walker in addition to the foreshadowing where Lamar says, look, how many lives could we have saved in Afghanistan if you had this serum? And you can almost see the PTSD in John Walker's eyes whenever he's thinking about that. I thought it was very telling as well that whenever they're having that conversation and Lamar reminds Walker that you have 3 medals of honor, you are okay, even though Lamar admits the serum is supposed to take the power you have and amplify it, which is a very Dr. Erskine thing to say, more foreshadowing. Walker agrees with Lamar when he talks to him about the 3 medals of honor, that somehow makes you a good person. And Walker reminds Lamar, we did a lot of things in Afghanistan that allowed us to get those medals that probably wasn't that morally acceptable anywhere else. I thought it was very telling that Walker still puts his moral compass in the hands of what other people think about him. And that is never, if we're gonna do a little, I'm gonna get on a soapbox for a second here. Preacher's gonna come out in me for a second here. It is never a good idea to take your moral direction from what other people think about you. You can go anywhere in the world, you can go online, and people's opinions and ideas about you will shift from day to day. But where your heart ends up is solely your responsibility. And that conversation between John and Lamar, when John knows he's done awful things, but he allows Lamar to make him believe, just like he believes in himself, that, well, people gave me these medals of honor, so I must be a good guy. It was more foreshadowing that they didn't have to do, but when it happened, I thought, oh, this is going to be bad when it turns. This is not going to be good. That was a harder moment for me than anything else that happened in the episode, because it was, you saw his heart turn right there, where he justified being able to take the serum that he already had in his pocket. And it just built and built and built, and when it finally happened, it was still shocking to see it happen. The disgrace that is now literally on that shield is going to force Sam to have to confront it. We're bouncing around a lot, but there were so many things in this episode that hit little buttons and pinged little ideas in my head that I'm piecing it together for you guys in different ways. So just bear with me. Go back and watch the episode again after you watch this and pick up on some of these things as well. There was a lot in there this time, story-wise, that really connected lots and lots of dots with character development and moral compasses and all those kind of things. With regard to that, when Sam finally confronts the Flag Smashers, who we find out later is one of the super soldiers, he calls them refugees, and the guy corrects him, and he calls himself an internationally displaced person. He doesn't even like the term refugee, that somehow being labeled a refugee is a source of power for people who are in power to label you as something you're not. And Sam understands that. Sam's sister understands that, because later on when Carly calls Sarah and Carly presses Sarah on the fact that, Captain America's doing this and that, Sarah actually says, and the line was so good, I wrote it down, was, "My world doesn't matter to America, so their mascot doesn't matter to me." That line there, that my world doesn't matter to America, it was fitting. It was also a commentary on our culture at times, but the little threads that were in there that had deeper meaning to us culturally, but also in this story, were really great. And trying to understand the power struggles that are going on here, culturally, politically, the things that Carly's fighting for, the things that Sam is trying to protect, and he wants everybody to work together, and he sees the need for these fights, but he's fighting them in a different way, is a really big deal. Then juxtapose that with the way that Walker finds power through the serum and tries to use that power and manipulate that power, and then that power gets away from him very, very quickly. And it does with Carly as well. Sam confronts her on that after the funeral, and she feels like she was cornered and trapped into saying something that made her sound like a supremacist, when in reality she worries that maybe she's been that all along. And I think we're going to see her in the next episode have to battle with the fact that she killed Hoskins. And that was a moment, one, that I did not see coming, but that I hate to say was almost needed for Walker to flip the way he did. And when it happened, you just knew, here it goes, here it comes. But Walker was already that guy before his friend died. That was just the excuse that he needed to go out and do what he did. The only problem is nobody else saw that. All they saw was the end result. They saw the end and not the means that justified it. And that idea ran through the entire episode. Bucky gets called on that with Io when she has her conversation with him in the alleyway. Walker and Hoskins have that conversation. Zemo mentions that kind of thing. Sam and Carly talk about that idea that the ends are not worth what you're doing to get there. And now there are more consequences than just explosions, right? Like Carly had her own explosion literally with the GRC facility, and she's having to deal with that. She's now killed Lamar. She's going to have to deal with that. But now this explosion on the other end where John Walker has killed someone in public, holding that shield in another country, there are political ramifications to it. There are moral implications to it. Sam and Bucky are going to have to deal with that too. Bucky's got to be angry that that shield literally has blood on it now, and metaphorically. And Sam is going to have to grapple with, I should have taken that shield, and if I had, this would not have happened. And now he's going to have to fight for something bigger than himself. And how is he going to do that? How is that going to happen? My money is on him having to take a serum somehow. But where did it come from? And who gives him permission to take it? Zemo was already excited about the fact that Sam didn't want to take the serum. Sam said he didn't want to take the serum. But how are they going to take down John Walker without the serum? Is Bucky going to be that sacrificial lamb, so to speak? Or is Sam going to have to step up and own that Captain America role and fight for it in a way that he didn't fight for it before? He gave it up willingly, but he should have. It wasn't a fight before, and now it is quite literally a fight to ensure that the legacy of Steve Rogers and the legacy of that shield live on. Having said all that, nothing made me happier in this episode than watching John Walker get his butt handed to him by the Dora Milaje. And Sam tries to warn him, you don't know what you're doing. And he still doesn't listen. And I was so glad because it was so satisfying to watch him just get taken out. Even to the point that when Walker said, why don't we just put down the pointy sticks until I thought, oh, please keep condescending them so that they will just own you. And he learned that he is way out of his league, that there are things here that he does not understand, and he is going in guns blazing. He's missing something that made Steve Rogers Captain America, and he knows he doesn't have it. And he thinks it's the serum, that if I was just strong enough, if I could just beat these guys, that somehow that would do it. And you find out pretty quick, and so does he, that's not going to do it. What's the government going to do about this? What are people going to do? Is public opinion going to turn on Walker quickly and Captain America and by extension the world? I don't know. I know that the Flag Smashers are going to have a much bigger army now. And Carly was begging, I wish we had more of that serum so that we could have a bigger army. I thought it was very interesting and another nice little twist of the story that the one vial of serum that they did have is actually going to end up getting Carly and the Flag Smashers more followers. Because in the veins of John Walker, it caused a moment that is going to make the world sympathetic for their cause and not for America and not for the government and not for the GRC by extension. And that political fallout is actually going to be really interesting in the next 2 episodes, and how Sam can somehow bring that back together by taking up that shield. Because people in the world know who Sam is. How are they going to feel when he takes the shield and when he fights off Walker somehow? And that might have to be a very public thing. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I'm really interested to see how they handle that. The next couple of episodes, there's 2 left, and it's going to be intense and it's going to be crazy. There's a lot that has to happen, and I'm excited for all of it. I've tried to be very calm and measured in this episode here with you guys because it was just intense. And this is not one of those episodes that I could come on and get super excited and, oh, these things were fun and these things are so awesome. There was a lot of dark in this episode, and that all made for a cliffhanger in the last 2 minutes of this episode that is going to resonate through the next 2 episodes and is going to resonate into the movies of the MCU. I have no doubt. It was a big, big moment, and I'm really interested to see what happens next. I'm curious to what you guys thought about those final 2 minutes of this episode. I know there's a lot of details and a lot of things that maybe you picked up that I didn't pick up, or that I picked up that you didn't think about. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of rewatches of this episode because there was so much going on. But what do you guys think about those last 2 minutes? Check out our prediction video from last week. Tell us how we did there, and pay attention and look out for our Easter egg videos and our prediction videos coming later in the week before we get to episode 5. You guys have a good week, and we'll see you next time.